Okay, everybody, ready? And action!
The program you are about to see is called Personal Ethics and the Future of the World. The title means that the future of this planet could depend on how you behave, that your actions and your behavior matter to the future. These days we hear plenty about some really scary problems. Global warming, war, ignorance, poverty, budget deficits, scandals. And it looks as though one of two things is going to happen. Either things are going to get better, or things are going to get worse. And the deciding factor, a lot of people believe, is personal ethics. How does one define ethics? The dictionary says that ethics has to do with telling right from wrong. But is it that easy? Let's go deeper. Let's look at why we keep showing this window being shattered. Say some friends have told you that they're the ones who threw a rock through a window and vandalized the school. Now you're in the principal's office, and he's asking you to tell him whether you know anything about it, which of course you do. Do you lie, saying you don't know a thing? Or do you rat on your friends? Tough choice. What you've got is a dilemma, an ethical dilemma. Because you don't have a choice between right and wrong. You have to choose between two rights. One right is the truth. You know who broke the window. But another right is loyalty, loyalty to your friends. And you've been taught to believe in that ever since you were little.
So what's it going to be? So what's it going to be? So what's it going to be?
You see, ethics often comes down to choosing between two rights. Our personal ethics force us to choose which right, which principle is more important in a given situation. Like here, loyalty or truth. You know, history's filled with examples where people have paid more attention to loyalty than to truth, with frightening consequences. Could there be a connection between being loyal to your friends and Germany's loyalty to Hitler? Maybe part of the problem Nazi Germany had was that too many individuals weren't ethically prepared, weren't ethically fit enough to make the necessary decisions that could have saved the world from so much tragedy.
We're beginning our second hour, all-night talk.
Okay, here's the scene. Talk show radio. You've heard it. The host? Intense, provocative. The topic? Something that stirs people up.
I hold in my hot little hands a page from a study done in 1989. Now, listen to this. A poll of junior and senior high school students. The question, who, in their opinion, is the most believable authority in matters of truth? Where's the truth? Who's telling the truth? Who do you turn to for the truth? The answers will shock you. And it makes it clear to me why this world is in the state that it's in and why the future doesn't look any brighter when you see what these kids think. 2% of the kids in this study think church leadership is the place they'd go for the truth. My God. No pun intended. And above that, just 3% say scientists are the most believable authority when it comes to matters of truth. Government and politicians? Well, they're not even on the list. 12% say they don't know who to turn to. Now stick with me here, there's a lot of numbers. 16% say that they turn to the Bible. 20%, 1 in 5, rely on their parents. 1 out of 5 say their parents. So who is the number one authority in matters of truth for American youth? 45% say they rely on their own personal experience. They're saying me, myself, I'm the most believable source of authority on truth. They're saying there is nothing beyond me.
The statistics that guy gave are true. That's what American Kids said in a recent survey. A lot of young people do rely on their own experience for their understanding of truth. So what's wrong with that? Well, we're making this program to suggest that your own personal experience isn't good enough when your decisions could affect the future of the world. Here's what we mean. It's about 1 o'clock in the morning. A couple of workers, a couple of individuals, a couple of people are facing an ethical dilemma. Their boss wants to try an experiment. An interesting experiment, but an extremely dangerous one. Each worker, each individual, knows that if he or she doesn't follow the boss's orders, they might lose their job. They also know that the risks connected to this experiment are enormous. What do they do? Well, in this story, which is true, they decided to keep quiet. They did the experiment, but the experiment went wrong. Very wrong. Hundreds of thousands of square miles wrong. Thousands of human lives wrong. And thousands of years wrong. That experiment on an April night in 1986 resulted in the worst industrial accident in mankind's history, radioactive fallout from the Chernobyl nuclear disaster. Did those workers make an unethical decision by going through with an experiment they knew might go wrong? You bet they did. And humanity and the world can't stand many more disasters like that. Here's a group of everyday Americans. Each one of them has personal values, principles, beliefs about what's important. There are organizations that study these values, and they've concluded that there are important principles that people throughout the world have in common. For example, go almost anywhere in the world and try and take something from somebody and see what happens. Personal, private property. It's pretty much a universal concept. And there are other basic values, apparently common to us all, that people around the world seem to use when they're confronted with tough decisions, ethical decisions. This program is going to suggest 5 of them to you. Here they are. See what you think. One common principle appears to be learning to respect yourself, learning to know yourself, to value yourself, and learning to make decisions that show respect for the beautiful, capable, potential-filled person you see when you look in the mirror. The second principle appears to be learning to respect reality. There are other names for it: honesty, truth, integrity. It's learning to admit to yourself the truth of what is really happening, not seeing the world the way you'd like it to be, or believing that your own fantasies or lies are true. A third principle: respect for community. It's the idea that in order to make the right decisions, you have to learn to feel that you are not alone in this world. You are part of a community. And every decision you make as an individual has a domino effect, not just on the people around you, but on the world and all it contains. A fourth common principle: respect for life. It's learning to make decisions that respect all kinds of life: human life, animal life, plant, and planet life. One final principle of ethical decision-making: respect for the future. It's learning to realize that your decisions will affect your life and your children's lives, and their children's lives. It's learning to act in a way that helps make their world better, not worse than your own. We spoke to Chris Parker, also known as KRS-One, about self-respect, because he's someone known for the strength and conviction of his individuality.
Ethics is something that is used in the crossroads of life. Every day you come to a crossroad. It's either you stop or you go. And that decision of stop and go would be my ethical decision. Decisions do make people move forward or backwards or sideways. That defines you. But it's also very dangerous because the decision is based on your education of both your past and your present. Therefore, if you are miseducated, you don't make the right decisions, therefore you cannot define self.
Learning is critical if you're going to apply the second human ethic we have suggested: respect for reality. Why is this program returning to Chernobyl? Because the Chernobyl nuclear disaster has a great deal to do with respect for reality. The accident wasn't only the result of a few people making an unethical decision in a control room. It's also a horrifying example of what happens when individuals ignore reality.
People believed that they were told that atomic power is very safe and there is no danger. People believed what the government said to them, that our nuclear power stations are the best in the world, are the safest in the world. People believed.
Radioactivity eventually killed the very photographers who shot these pictures.
This is not only now our tragedy. We are living in an interrelated world.
An interrelated world. This is what we mean about personal, ethical decisions affecting the future of the world. We're all in this together. Which brings us to our third principle, respect for community.
Community to me, and I can only go by, my own, is of people living and working together.
The speaker is Roy Freiberg, and we asked him to talk about the ethical principle of respect for community, because he's a man with a passion for what he believes community should be. He's a one-man community welfare center who works in one of the most desolate and discouraging neighborhoods in the United States. Roy says it all boils down to trying to give people hope.
Nobody can live without hope, whether you have drugs, no matter where you're from. If you don't have hope, life really doesn't mean too much to you at all,
Respect for life. When mankind first saw this picture of a lonely planet, people wondered how this new view of the Earth would change the way they feel about it. One thing that's happened is that when something like the Exxon Valdez oil spill happens, as it did in Alaska, people understand that that kind of disaster is like an injury to a living planet. But what does the Exxon Valdez have to do with personal ethics? This is Larry Wade. He's the captain of the oil tanker Glacier Bay that runs the same route to Alaska that the Exxon Valdez did. We called him on a ship to see how the fourth principle, respect for life, enters into his thinking. After all, he's a person in a job whose decisions can affect the future of the world.
If you're running in a 30 to 40 to 50 foot sea, and even with a ship this size, the ship is severely moving up and down and possibly rolling heavily, and you are taking an awful lot of water across the deck.
Because of the dangerous environment he's in, and the men who depend on him, and the millions of gallons of oil in his ship, Captain Wade has to be ethically fit. At any moment, something could happen that will force him to make critical decisions.
When you have to think about what you would do in a situation, there's a lot of things that go through your mind, and probably the high point in my thinking would be the safety of my crew, followed immediately by the safety of my ship. And thirdly, maybe by the environmental aspects of it. And lastly would be the interruption of the trade or the movement of the oil to the oil company.
Man, ship, environment. Those are his priorities. You may or may not agree with them. But Captain Wade has taken the time to think about and form his own personal ethical code. That other captain, the captain of the Exxon Valdez, Joseph Hazelwood, he faced his own personal test of ethical fitness. He had to decide which was more correct, being on the bridge when his ship was in hazardous waters, or being in his cabin because he was entitled to some time off and some time to relax. Did he make the right decision?
Probably that question has been discussed more by the people at sea than probably by any other segment of the population in the world. And as seamen, we all seem to come to the conclusion that we feel that the captain was wrong in leaving the bridge at the time he did.
Perhaps ethical fitness means being ready to make your own decisions whether or not there's a law that tells you what you should or shouldn't do.
Ethically, he should have been on the bridge. Legally, he was doing the thing that was right. It was no problem with it. But just because legally it says you can't do something, it doesn't mean that that's what you should do.
Things have changed. Your personal ethical decisions will have more of an effect on the future of the world than your ancestors' decisions ever did. 100 years ago, a ship captain couldn't cause so much environmental havoc by running his ship aground. 100 years ago, a couple of scientists working alone at night couldn't unleash anything like the radioactive fallout of Chernobyl. But today, life is much more complex, so much more challenging. And the future is going to be even more demanding. Preparing for that future is what the last story in this program is all about. Learning to act and think with respect for the future, with a reverence for the future. Here's what we mean. Right now, there are people researching something called the human genome. Inside each of us are genes that hold information, indications about how healthy each one of us is now, and how healthy each one of us will be as our lives unfold. In the next 5 to 7 years, research into the human genome will produce revolutionary scientific knowledge. On the one hand, that knowledge may help us cure disease. On the other hand, that knowledge may tempt us to play God. When science can read your very personal genetic information like a book, who will get to read it? Who will get access to the genetic information about any children you may have? How much will genetic information really be able to tell us about what a person will become? These are just a few of the questions and just one issue to be seriously considered by each of you.
Okay, everybody.
This program has suggested 5 basic principles that you can use as a starting point for developing your own personal ethical code, a code to use when you have to make tough decisions. We are living in a critical time in human history. We, the people alive on the planet today, have been called the generation of decision. Maybe that phrase means that you have the power to decide if you want to be part of the ethical problem or part of the ethical solution. Remember what's at stake: life, health, and happiness in the 21st century and beyond.